It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for our weekly discussion of the important legal and political issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And you're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. You can send me a tweet at Marc Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all of my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and I'll look at some great merchandise we have. Check out the MarcScaringiShow.com website. And welcome to my listeners on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And today we're broadcasting also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, so you're welcome to follow and comment live, or you can call in and let us know what you think about the important political and legal issues of the day. And as you know, Attorney General Bill Barr has launched an investigation of the investigators. He's investigating the origins of the Obama administration's investigation into then-candidate Donald J. Trump for what turned out to be false allegations that his campaign colluded with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. Just days ago, the president ordered the CIA and the country's 15 other intelligence agencies to cooperate with Attorney General Barr's investigation. And the president granted the Attorney General the authority to unilaterally declassify the documents of these 16 intelligence agencies. And yesterday, as the president was preparing to leave for his trip to Japan, he told White House reporters they'll be able to see how this hoax, how this witch hunt started, why it started. It was an attempted coup or an attempted takedown of the President of the United States. We're exposing everything, Trump said. We're being, a word that you like, transparent. And that was the president's justification, his explanation for why he has ordered the declassification of these intelligence agency materials and documents. Of course, even though the media extols the virtue of transparency, and this is a pretty transparent act by our commander-in-chief, the media extols the virtue of transparency above all else, they only actually believe it when it's used to expose Republicans and support Democrats. In this case, the media, of course, does not want a transparency. The media does not want the intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice and the FBI to have their documents declassified because many believe the declassification will reveal even further, in more detail, the hoax for what it was. But it looks like the president, to his credit, is not backing down, and he's going on the attack, as he should. Earlier in the week, during Wednesday's presidential press conference in the Rose Garden, the president referred to those top Obama administration officials, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and Page, as having committed treason. The president declared the crime was committed on the other side. So there's the president, the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, informing the country that a crime was committed on the other side. The other side, that's Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, et al., former officials in the Obama administration and the intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice and the FBI. The president is pointing the finger at those individuals for committing a crime, the crime being the false, fake investigation of the president, then candidate Trump, and then President Trump and his aides and associates for the fabrication of the Russian Trump interference hoax. They conspired to falsely accuse and frame the president in order to deny him the presidency, or once he got it, to have him removed from office. And in my view, as the saying goes, turnabout is not only fair play, in this case, it's the fulfillment of a presidential constitutional obligation. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution compels the President of the United States to ensure the laws be faithfully executed. And the laws of the United States were grossly misused and abused by Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and Page et al. And all of those involved in this Russia hoax. So those individuals abused and misused U.S. law, and our president, whose job is to make sure it's faithfully executed, is assisting his Attorney General Bill Barr in this investigation of the investigators by declassifying the materials used by these intelligence agencies to fabricate this alleged crime and perpetrate this hoax. And Attorney General Bill Barr, well, he's asked John Durham, the United States Attorney in Connecticut, to conduct the investigation into the origins of this Russian hoax. And it's been reported that Barr has personally met with the heads of the intelligence agencies to discuss the investigation, and that it's a top priority of our Attorney General. So it appears now we have a hands-on Attorney General. Unlike, I must say, our former Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who was a wonderful U.S. Senator and a terrific and avid supporter of the president when he was running for office and was very good on immigration. But in my view, he just truly dropped the ball on this Russian hoax. But boy, we've got a tough law enforcement officer now in the helm of that Justice Department. And he's got a hands-on role here in investigating the investigators, as he should. Now, the intelligence agencies and the mainstream media, they're strong supporters. They will, of course, they're coming up with a defense with reasons why the president should not have declassified these materials. Now, they're pushing back. They're complaining that the declassification will create risk of exposure to, quote, sources and methods, end quote, as if simply uttering that magical phrase should prevent the release of these materials that are obviously critical to the Attorney General's review of the conduct or perhaps the bad conduct of those former Obama administration officials who carried over into the Trump administration, some of whom did and were involved in this fabrication of a crime, this attempted entrapment of our president. And I think that it's a great thing that our Attorney General is doing this. And of course, the intelligence agencies and the members of the deep state are going to push back and push back hard. That sources and methods, we hear that time and time again as a justification for why the American people can't be told, can't be allowed to know and learn what our U.S. taxpayer dollars have been used, what government workers, the director of the FBI, the director of the CIA, they work for the American people. And of course, they do not want us to know what they were up to. So they assert everything's classified, except for those things that former FBI Director James Comey wants to release and leak himself. Of course, that's not classified. But everything else, everything that can show the American people, shed light on the machinations of these high-level top members of the deep state in their attempt to frame the president for a non-crime that he didn't do. We'll talk more about this declassification effort when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show. And welcome back to The Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And thank you for suffering through those Scaringi Law commercials that are becoming ubiquitous. By the way, if you own a business and you'd like to advertise your goods or services on The Marc Scaringi Show, you can give us a call over at the law firm at 717-657-7770, or just send me an email, Marc, M-A-R-C, at scaringilaw.com, and we'll get you set up to provide a forum for you to advertise the good things that you do in your business to the great listeners we have throughout central Pennsylvania. And I think we're the number one news talk radio show in south central Pennsylvania. It might be because we're the only news talk radio show on the 1 o'clock hour. That might have something to do with our high ranking. But you're welcome to advertise your goods and services here. We're talking about the president's decision to declassify the otherwise classified materials by the 16 intelligence agencies under the United States government, all under the supervision, by the way, and control of the President of the United States, who is the chief law enforcement officer of the country. And some of our Democratic friends and friends in the media seem to forget that these men all work for Donald Trump, the head of the CIA, the head of the FBI, the Attorney General, the National Intelligence Director. They work for the president. And the president has ordered that these materials, documents, such things involved, utilized by these individuals in the beginning stages of their investigation into the Trump campaign, with under this false pretext that it had been involved in some sort of non-existent collusion with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. This Attorney General, Bill Barr, wants to read those documents. He wants to read them, review them, analyze them. Did those individuals, former FBI Director Jim Comey and others, did they have probable cause to launch this investigation? What was the investigation, as Bill Barr likes to say, predicated on? Well, I think it's going to turn out. We already know it was predicated on nothing. It was predicated on innuendo, rumors, hearsay, if you will, perpetrated by Christopher Steele in his dodgy or dirty dossier that was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. It was opposition research that contained multiple falsehoods, none of which could be verified, and probably contained a lot of Russian disinformation that was packaged and presented to the FBI, and the FBI then utilized those materials in its FISA court application and perpetrated a fraud upon the court and the American people. The members of the deep state in the intelligence community, they are pushing back and pushing back hard, of course. Why? Well, because they're likely guilty of being involved in this attempted framing of then-candidate Trump and then the president, and as the president calls it, a coup d'etat. Let's read the response from John Brennan, the former director of the CIA. He told MSNBC host Chris Hayes, he said, "I see it as a very, very serious and outrageous move on the part of Mr. Trump, once again trampling on the statutory authorities of the Director of National Intelligence and the heads of the independent intelligence agencies." Now, end quote. Now, let's just break that down just a bit. Someone, Chris Hayes, the man who wears those beautiful ladies' glasses on MSNBC, should have perhaps followed up that statement with, "Mr. Brennan, can you identify independent intelligence agencies? I was unaware that there are intelligence agencies that are independent from the executive branch of the United States government. Is there some sort of fourth branch of government called independent intelligence agencies?" The answer, of course, is no. There are no independent intelligence agencies that are somehow detached from the supervision and control of the President of the United States. So our bespectacled Christopher Hayes over there at MSNBC lacks basic understanding of our government to even push back on John Brennan, who claims that we have independent intelligence agencies. And did President Trump, is he trampling on the statutory authorities of the Director of National Intelligence? Is he? Can John Brennan name one statute that the president has violated when he gave Bill Barr, the Attorney General, the authority to declassify those materials that he deems necessary to conduct his review of the work of Brennan, Comey, Clapper, et al.? Name the statute, John Brennan. Of course, he won't be able to name a statute. I mean, this is just one statement this former director of the CIA makes on MSNBC, and it's the whole thing is factually, as Newt Gingrich would say, factually incorrect, factually inaccurate. I mean, that's really inaccurate when you're factually inaccurate. And Brennan continues, he says, and it's unclear to me what Mr. Barr is actually going to do. Is he investigating a crime? Well, what's the predication of that crime? Or is he just going to be looking for information that Mr. Trump can just give to his defenders on the right and cherry-pick information that could be taken out of context? Boy, John Brennan, former director of the CIA, he has perhaps a little bit of a guilty conscience there. Doesn't he sound like someone who's worried about something? Perhaps he's worried that the Attorney General will discover that these gentlemen fabricated this Trump-Russian conspiracy, made it up, tried to entrap the president. We know that's what they're going to find because that's what happened. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to just read the Mueller report. That's what happened here. And John Brennan is scared because perhaps his head proverbially is on the chopping block. But we'll find out. We'll find out. But interestingly, when John Brennan is concerned, is Bill Barr, is he investigating a crime? Well, what's the predication of that crime? Well, now Brennan really wants to make sure there's a predication for a crime before the Attorney General investigates John Brennan and James Clapper and James Comey. Boy, they want that predication for a crime to justify an investigation now, don't they? But did they have one to investigate the Trump campaign for collusion with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 election? Can anybody identify it? What was that predication for the investigation that John Brennan says Attorney General Barr must have to investigate him? There was none. There was no predication for Jim Comey, James Clapper, John Brennan to investigate the Trump campaign. That's like the pot calling the kettle black when John Brennan is demanding predication for a crime before he can be investigated. Brennan also said, this is very serious, and I know that my former colleagues in the intelligence agencies are looking upon this with great concern and worry. Yeah, they're worried about being exposed as being part of a conspiracy to frame a president. Of course they're worried, Mr. Brennan. Now, how about former Obama Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, the gentleman who actually committed perjury before the United States Congress when he stated that the United States government was not surveilling and recording the metadata from all of our telephone calls. You'll remember that from a few years ago. James Clapper, well, he claimed that declassification will put people's lives at risk. Now, that's, of course, BS. Whose lives are going to be put at risk for declassifying the documents involved in the origins of the investigation in the Trump-Russian collusion? Because there was no collusion. So whose lives are at risk of what? The whole thing was made up. The only person who had contact with the Russian government was a former British agent who was paid by Hillary Clinton. That's Christopher Steele. The whole world knows who he is. And he was obviously duped by the Russians who fed him false information. Christopher Steele is not a spy for the United States, nor is he a spy for Great Britain, our ally. He's retired. He's just a private citizen who's doing work for Democratic campaigns to try to frame Donald Trump. That's all he does. We don't have to worry about exposing him. He's been exposed to the world 1,000 times over. I mean, he was a private contractor paid by Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee. The whole world knows that. Vladimir Putin is laughing at this ridiculous attempt by these former Obama administration officials to cover up what they did. Now, efforts to prevent the declassification of these materials, my friends, that's the cover-up. The Democrats, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, they accused the president of conducting a cover-up because he's pushing back on cooperating with yet another round of congressional investigations into the now disproven and fake Russia hoax. But the Democrats, the intelligence community, and the media, they're the ones conducting the cover-up. We'll talk more about the declassification order by the president when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. And welcome back to The Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580, or you can comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook, or send me a tweet and we'll read your tweet or your comment on the air. What do you think? Did the President of the United States make the right call when he issued the declassification order to Attorney General Bill Barr? Call in 717-540-0580 and let me know whether you think the president made the right call. Or do you agree with John Brennan, Jim Clapper, and those former heads of the intelligence agencies who are very concerned that the Attorney General might be disclosing sources and methods that were utilized in the fake Russia hoax collusion investigation? What were those sources and methods? Does anybody know? Well, I think if you just open up the paper or turn on your computer and digitally open the paper, you'll read about the Mueller report, and you'll read all about the sources and methods that were utilized in this fake hoax of an investigation. And I can understand why the president is so angry. His own government, the men who led the top intelligence and law enforcement agencies, who all work for the president, they conspired to have him framed, not only for a crime he didn't commit, but for a crime that does not exist. And the president, he could do nothing to stop this attempted coup. His own Department of Justice appointed the special counsel, even though there was no evidence the president or any of his associates conspired with the Russian government to interfere in the U.S. election, even though the letter appointing the special counsel did not even list or name what the crime or crimes were that the special counsel was supposed to investigate. That's because there were none. There was no predicate crime or predicate offense to justify the investigation that former CIA Director John Brennan he's very concerned about having one now before he gets investigated. Obviously, he wants to save his own skin. But the question is, should the president have issued the declassification order? You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. Let me know what you think. We have Ron from Elizabethtown. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, this is what impresses me with President Trump the most. When he invited Chuck Schumer and Nancy to dinner a year and a half ago to talk to them, they thought they were going to be able to snooker him and just bully their way through him. All he's doing is raising children. The Democrats are like raising spoiled little children, and now that they're caught, they're going to blame everybody to run. The rats are leaving the sunken ship, buddy. It's so much fun to watch. Look, Mark, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, what religion, who you are. If you raise children and one of them is lying and you know the child's lying, you don't bust them right away. You just let them keep hanging themselves. The Democrats are running around like a dog on a chain with a long leash, and all they're doing is running further away, and eventually, Mark, President Trump's going to yank that leash back, and they're just going to get hanging themselves. It's a pleasure to watch.
Well, I
enjoy it.
I think the president finally has an attorney general who has the gravitas and the courage and the backbone to take on the deep state.
Indeed, that's what we all see out here. Every working class person, it doesn't matter. When you look at these guys, the way they act and they're condescending and patronizing. Look, no more inside trading in the House. No more. These people are rich. All right, buddy.
Hey, Ron, thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend. and I will soon be picnicking with family in just about an hour and enjoying this gorgeous day we have. But right now we have more important things to do. We're talking about President Trump's decision to declassify the materials that were utilized by the individuals, former Obama administration officials, some of whom carried over into the Trump administration, namely James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. Thankfully, John Brennan and James Clapper did not carry over, but they have done their best to abuse the laws of this country, to undermine the President of the United States in an attempt to falsely accuse and frame him for a crime he did not compete. Now, for the past 3 years, the President has endured 24/7 news coverage about this investigation into him. He's had to endure increasing calls from the most unhinged on the left for his impeachment, all because Obama administration officials used Hillary Clinton's campaign opposition research that contained complete and total falsehoods to try to frame the president. Now, Trump could not fire special counsel Mueller. In a legal sense, he could. The president has the power to fire the special counsel. The president's the chief executive of the executive branch. The special counsel, contrary to the delusions of Democratic leaders in Congress, is under the supervision of the president, not Congress. But in a political sense, not a chance. He could never have done so. The media would have claimed this act was worse than Watergate. Democrats in the House would have begun immediate impeachment proceedings. Never Trump or U.S. senators like Mitt Romney would have joined the call for the impeachment of the president had he fired special counsel Bob Mueller. Now, Democrats in the media, they claim the president tried to obstruct justice because he told his then White House lawyer, White House counsel, Don McGahn, that Mueller needed to be removed because of a conflict of interest. Now, something the media failed to report is the fact that the regulations governing the special counsel say the special counsel may be removed for a conflict of interest. Remember, the special counsel is appointed when the Attorney General believes it's a conflict of interest for the Department of Justice to conduct an investigation into a particular matter. And by the way, the FBI had been investigating the president for over a year by the time special counsel Bob Mueller was appointed. Why was it all of a sudden a conflict of interest for the FBI to continue the investigation after the president fired Jim Comey? Think of it. The FBI is investigating Trump. They're investigating. No conflict of interest for the FBI to investigating the president. No conflict of interest for the FBI to investigate the president. Trump fires Comey. Boom. Stop. Now there's a conflict of interest for the FBI to continue its investigation of the president. What conflict? There was none. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, he doesn't state what the conflict was. He just says there's a conflict. Need a special counsel. Even though the FBI had been investigating the president for several months and investigating the president when he was a private citizen for up to a year. But for many, many, many months, the FBI was investigating the president. No conflict of interest. Then Comey's gone. All of a sudden, Deputy AG Ron Rosenstein says there's a conflict of interest. We got to have a special counsel. How? I mean, that can anybody explain that? I mean, there was no conflict to substantiate the appointment of the special counsel in the first place. If there was no conflict for the FBI to investigate the president and the Russia hoax before Comey was fired, one didn't automatically materialize as a result of that termination of Comey to prevent the FBI from continuing the very same investigation it had been doing up to that date. Yet Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, he appointed the special counsel because he believed the Department of Justice and the FBI was conflicted from investigating the president without explaining why, no explanation. Yet he appoints a special counsel in Bob Mueller who may have been conflicted from investigating the president. And when the president brings up the point that the special counsel has conflicts of interest and the regulations governing the appointment of the special counsel say he can be removed for conflicts of interest, the president brings up the issue. The president thinks Mueller has conflicts of interest, so he tells his White House counsel to tell Rosenstein to remove Bob Mueller because he's got conflicts of interest. And somehow the president is obstructing justice by doing this. The removal of a special counsel upon conflict grounds is not obstructing justice. If the attorney general had determined the special counsel had a conflict, he would have replaced him with a person who didn't. That's not obstructing justice. That's doing justice by removing a prosecutor with a conflict and replacing him with a prosecutor without a conflict. That's what you want our chief law enforcement officer to be doing. Well, of course, the deep state is going to cover up all of its wrongdoings as much as it can. In an interview with Fox News, the Attorney General expressed concern about a lack of answers about the origins of this investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Attorney General Bill Barr said, "I've been trying to get answers to the questions, and I found that a lot of the answers have been inadequate, and some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together." Now, why is the Attorney General getting inadequate answers from the officials in the Department of Justice and the FBI? That means perhaps they're covering up their role in the involvement in the fake attempted prosecution of the president. We'll talk more about the president's order to declassify these intelligence agency materials when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show. And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Thanks for joining us today on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend. We're talking about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. We're talking about how President Trump just days ago ordered the declassification of materials, documents, and utilized by the intelligence agencies, members of the Department of Justice and the FBI in their investigation of then-candidate Donald J. Trump and his campaign associates for alleged collusion with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. Of course, Special Counsel Bob Mueller's report concluded there was no conclusion. There's no evidence of conclusion. You and I knew that. We've been talking about that for how many years now, Tori? About 2.5, 3 years. That's Tori, our producer here at WHP 580. We've been talking for about 3 years about how there's no collusion. Just read my columns on Penn Live and the Western Journal and American Thinker. I've had it all analyzed for my readers. We've broken it all down. We've examined the facts and the law. We've reached these conclusions 3 years ago. What's the government been doing in the meantime? Wasting all these taxpayer dollars, $35 million, according to the president. He had that nice placard at his Rose Garden press conference when he came out of the cabinet room from a very brief meeting with crying Chuck Schumer, and I guess he's calling Nancy Pelosi crazy Nancy Pelosi at this time, although he's not committed to that nickname fully yet. He reserves the right to come up with a different nickname for Nancy Pelosi in the course of the coming months. The president came out of that press conference, went right into the Rose Garden, and blasted the Democrats for Nancy Pelosi for just an hour ago, saying the president is involved in a cover-up. A cover-up of what? What is the president covering up? Can anybody ask Nancy Pelosi that question? The president has been the most transparent president in my lifetime. Millions of documents he's provided. I mean, his entire staff at the White House, he had them investigated, questioned by Bob Mueller. The man has bent over backwards to provide every ounce of information to the special counsel, knowing that there was no crime in the first place. Now the president has ordered the declassification of the materials and documents and things utilized by the investigators during their investigation. And the media is apoplectic. Members of the deep state, never-Trumpers, our friends in the Democratic Party, are deranged with anger and outrage that the president would declassify these materials. Well, isn't that being transparent? Isn't declassifying and making the records available to the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, who probably has the national security clearance to read classified materials. I mean, isn't that being transparent? The intelligence community is claiming that these materials associated with the origins of its investigation into this Trump-Russia hoax can't be declassified because it will reveal sources and methods. Well, we already know that this man, Stephen Halper, a man the FBI claims is an FBI informant or was, we already know he was trying to frame George Papadopoulos, the low-level volunteer on the Trump campaign. We all know that the FBI used an informant to try to frame and entrap Papadopoulos. Now, of course, the FBI used Halper as much more than an informant. An informant, someone who reports to law enforcement on the goings-on that he sees and hears in the normal course of his life. But that's not what Halper did. Halper was acting as an agent for the FBI, working for it, carrying out its bidding, reaching out to George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had never met Halper before, had no idea who the man was. It's Halper reaching out to George Papadopoulos, sending him an unsolicited email in September 2016 saying he wants to discuss foreign policy with him, and Halper says the FBI informant, paid for by you and me, my friends, with your taxpayer dollars, Halper says to Papadopoulos, I'll pay you $3,000 and I'll fly you to London and let's talk about foreign policy for a couple of days. Let's see what you can do, and you can write a paper for me. You can write a paper for me on like natural gas issues in the Mediterranean or something like that for $3,000. I mean, someone tell Steve Halper, I'll write him a paper on natural gas deposits in the Mediterranean for $3,000. I mean, I'll write him a paper for $2,000. I'll cut him a break. I mean, this is the origin of this Russian Trump hoax. You have an academic over in London, Steve Halper, reaching out to George Papadopoulos, who Trump probably met once. He's a volunteer foreign policy person on the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign threw together a foreign policy group when the media was attacking Trump for having no understanding of foreign policy, so his campaign says, and I've worked on statewide campaigns here in Pennsylvania. I know what they do. So the campaign manager says to somebody, hey, put together a foreign policy committee. Find whoever you can who has whatever credentials, get them on the committee so we can say that we have a foreign policy committee and we've got experts. Because the media, I mean, they don't look at the success of the foreign policy advisors. They just call them foreign policy advisors. Put on the name they're experts, boom, you're done. That's all you need to do in campaigns and elections. Doesn't matter if your foreign policy is catastrophically bad, as long as you got the people the media say are experts in foreign. Okay, well, I'm digressing. But anyway, so the FBI gets Halper to pay Papadopoulos to fly to London, gives him $3,000 to write a paper, but that was all made up. That was all. This is a sting operation. This is just baiting. This is just enticing Papadopoulos to come to London so that the FBI, through Halper, can try to frame this man. So Papadopoulos accepts the offer. He meets with Halper, and a woman Halper claimed was his assistant, the woman who went by the name Azra Turk, her alias. No one knows her real name. According to the New York Times, she was a government investigator. For which government? No one knows. Papadopoulos described her as a voluptuous blonde woman in her 30s who spoke with a heavy Turkish accent. And he said the Azra Turk, which is a great made-up name if you're Turkish, you call yourself Azra Turk. She was very flirtatious with Papadopoulos during the London visit. Wined him and dined him at his hotel. So what is she? What is she, my listeners? You know, you read Ian Fleming novels. You watch James Bond movies. Azra Turk is a honeypot. She's there to use her feminine wiles to try to get on Papadopoulos's good side and get him to whisper sweet nothings about his attempts to work with Vladimir Putin to break into the DNC's email server to ferret out those emails and put them on WikiLeaks. That's what the FBI was going for here. I mean, it's and during the, and you got to read Papadopoulos's interviews about this. He said he thought it was very odd, this woman who spoke in a Turkish accent, who really didn't know anything about foreign policy and is flirting with him and giving him signals and signs that she wanted to get to know him in a much better way. And Halper's there cross-examining him, interrogating him about his Trump campaign work and any communications he's had with the Russians. And Papadopoulos is saying to Halper, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, this could be a made-for-TV movie. But friends, this is your FBI. These are your taxpayer dollars. So how much money have you spent in your taxpayer dollars? How much of your money went to the honeypot, went to Azra Turk for her to flirt with George Papadopoulos? I mean, they stayed in a beautiful London hotel. They had a beautiful, sumptuous meal. $3,000, Papa. I wonder if he had to return the $3,000 he got to write the paper. It's all a ruse. So these are the sources and methods that James Clapper and John Brennan want to protect from this declassification. That's it. Those are the sources and methods. That's what our FBI came up with in an attempt to entrap George Papadopoulos, Trump campaign official who Trump probably never met. That's the start. That's that and Carter Page and the fraudulent FISA warrant to surveil him. Those are the origins of the deep state's investigation into the Trump campaign based upon crimes they made up themselves using their own informants and agents and a 30-year-old voluptuous blonde honeypot named Azra Turk. That's it. That's your government at work. And Brennan and Clapper et al., they don't want those documents to be declassified. They want to protect those sources and methods. I say in the interest of transparency, the president made the right call. Open up all of those documents. Let's read the emails. Let's read the memos. Let the American people in to find out and see once and for all what our own government was doing to a private citizen running for president whom they hated. It's on record in email after text message. Let the open air and the sunlight in, and let justice be done. That's about all the time we have today for the Marc Scaringi Show. I want to thank you for listening on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio and Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Tune in every Saturday, 1 o'clock, where we discuss the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And happy Memorial Day weekend.